Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a gamer between dimensions. When a boy wakes up in the world of Naruto with no memory of the past, foggy memories of the future, and a convenient gamer-like ability, so what's he to do? The only option is to get stronger and move forward. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 10. Time sure flies. I thought as I opened my eyes from my meditation and took a deep breath. I looked around at the grassy training grounds and noted that my clones were still training with the elemental skills I had managed to obtain from various sources. I closed my eyes and allowed my mind to sift through all that I had accomplished over the years. I opened them and decided to check my progress. Observe. Name, Jordan. Race, human. Level, LVL 58. Next level, 6, 755/165, 400. HP, 31822/31822 Regen, 636.4 per min. CP, 76553/76553 Regen, 2067.0 per min. CC, 96%. STR, 247.8. VIT, 260.4. Dex, 203.7. INT, 324. WIS, 318.6. NG, 570. Points, 387. Rio, 875,348. Good, but not good enough, I thought as I looked at my base stats. Just based on the numerical value, I was probably around low Jonin level based on the knowledge and observations I had gathered throughout the years. My stats would have been higher if it hadn't been for my staunch dedication in creating an improved healing technique. It wasn't like I had been lazy with my physical training, but most of my time had been spent studying and researching topics related to my goal. While I wasn't particularly happy with my current strength level thus far, looking at my chakra control percentage couldn't help but make me nod appreciatively. Some time back, I had managed to increase my natural lightning affinity to 100%, and the moment I had done so, I had felt a subtle shift in my chakra. This change had allowed me to perfectly control my lightning and element, and as a result, I no longer had the need to use hand seals with that type of elemental technique. Furthermore, it had increased my CC by 1%, which meant that my past conjecture was correct. Increasing my elemental affinities to 100% will further help increase my CC. The amount of maneuverability and freedom this gave me was more than worth the amount of effort I had to put in, and due to this, I had put in even more effort into fully leveling my other elemental skills. My water elemental skill was coming along nicely, and I had almost managed to fully level my natural water affinity. As I continued to observe my status, I lightly tapped my chin in thought. Due to my incredibly fast processing capabilities in conjunction with eidetic memory, I was easily capable of remembering and calculating what my base stats were from the bonuses my skills gave me. Sometimes, however, I just didn't feel like having to go through that effort, however slight it may be, and I now wondered if there was a way to see my base stats. Would you like to toggle stat bonuses on? Y/N. I blinked. That's convenient, I thought before clicking Y. Instantly, the display changed. Name, Jordan. Race, human. Level, LVL 58. Next level, 6, 755/165, 400. HP, 31822/31822 Regen, 636.4 per min. CP, 76553/76553 Regen, 2067.0 per min. CC, 96%. STR, 118 plus, 210%, equals 247.8. VIT, 124 plus, 210%, equals 260. Dex, 97 plus, 210%, equals 203.7. Int, 120 plus 270% equals 324. Wis, 118 plus 270% equals 318.6. Ng, 150 plus 380% equals 570. Points, 387. Rio, 875,348, $87,534.80. Well, this made things easier. I quickly roamed through my stats again and nodded my head. It had been quite difficult to break past the 100 stat point barrier for most of my stats, but in the end, it had only benefited me. As a result, for breathing through those barriers, however, I had unlocked new interesting perks for my stats. Unique Muscle Memory, Passive, LVL Max. Unique muscle memory is a skill granted to those with an incredible mind-muscle connection. It allows the user to rapidly improve upon all skills that require the use of the body. Increases the percent training rate of body skills by the user's strength. If the user has 200 STR, then their bodily skills will improve by 200%. Accelerated Analysis, Passive, LVL Max. Accelerated analysis is a skill granted to those with incredible processing capabilities and brain power. It allows the user to increase their processing capabilities by the full percent of the user's INT stat. If the user has 200 INT, then their thought processes will be accelerated by 200%. Empathy, Passive, LVL Max. With great wisdom, you are able to understand the emotions of all living beings you come across. Empathy allows the user to grasp and know all the emotions and emotional changes any individual is going through. It has a maximum range equal to the user's WIS stat in meters, and it can be turned on or off at will. If the user has 200 WIS, then this skill will have a maximum range of 200 meters. This range can be adjusted to the user's whims. Interestingly enough, I hadn't gotten a new skill for ENGY yet, even though I had gotten my base stat up to 150. It made me wonder if I was going to even get any more skill perks, or if I had to further increase my base stats to higher levels. Now then, that DEX though. I wasn't sure if it was some odd obsessive compulsion, but seeing my DEX as the only state that wasn't at 100 really bugged me, especially since I could actually see the numerical value, unlike before when I had usually just calculated my base stats off of my percent multipliers in my head. It grated me enough that I contemplated using a few of my stat points for a brief moment. It's only 3. And gave in. Ping. Congratulations, the skill Hawkeyes has been granted by reaching 100 DEX. Hawkeyes, Passive, LVL Max. Hawkeyes is a skill granted to those with incredible natural vision. With this ability, every point the user has in dexterity is a meter-long increase to their natural vision range. It also allows the user to see in the dark. I.e., a DEX stat of 200, including bonuses, would increase your maximum vision range by 200 meters. My eyes widened as I felt them change. It was such an odd and disorienting feeling to have my vision suddenly become better and clearer by multiple times that I had to blink multiple times in order to get used to it. After a few seconds, I finally managed to adapt to my improved sight and took in the surroundings eagerly. This. The color. The detail. The resolution. Everything looked so much more vibrant than before, and I could see and notice slightly different shades of color and texture that I hadn't been able to prior to awakening this skill. The experience of Hawkeyes was almost as intense as the first time I had gotten the empathy skill. And I ruined the mood. I thought as less than pleasant memories resurfaced. Even with my emotions dulled by 90%, the intense emotional backlash I had received from experiencing the emotions of every sentient being within a 265-meter radius was not one I wanted to experience again. It was only thanks to the fact that I could control its range, and that I hadn't been in the center of town, that kept me from breaking down from enduring all those weird and random emotions at once. For that reason, I usually kept my empathy barrier, so to speak, at a 5-meter wide area around me just so that I could only feel the emotions of the people in my immediate vicinity. The other skills I had gotten had been much easier to manage, and there hadn't been much I had to or even could do to keep them in check. I leaned back against the tree I had been meditating on and picked up the book I had been studying titled Chakra Theory in Biology. It was an advanced-level chakra theory book which went into great detail about how chakra improved upon the various biological processes of the body, and was written by none other than the professor himself, Hirosaki Sarutobi. This past year and a half or so, ever since my first mission, I had been researching pretty much all of the books that had anything to do with natural chakra and chakra theory, all in order to create a medical skill that could regrow limbs. While I hadn't made a major breakthrough as of yet, I had come up with many plans after running countless variables in my mind. The most promising one had to do with creating a seal that absorbed and controlled the input of natural energy into the technique at just the right proportions. The only issue with this had been that I hadn't had a single clue about how to sense and gather the natural energy with the seal, but luckily, I had Minato to help. The backbone for the seal had been mostly completed with his help, but there were a few logistical issues that had to be worked out, such as creating a system to prevent the natural energy from mixing with the user's chakra. Another issue was matching the input of natural energy to the output of chakra that the user was using for their technique. Since I was planning to improve upon the traditional mystic palm technique, which already required immense chakra control, the modulation of natural energy had to be perfect. Besides those, I had found a medical technique in Konoha's library that had served as the backbone for my seal. The healing resuscitation regeneration technique. It was an extremely complex medical ninjutsu with a low success rate, and it also required teamwork between the users for a successful treatment. However, more important than that was the fact that it used a unique Fuinjutsu seal as its basis. The seal used was square in shape and would be drawn on the floor, while the patient would be placed at the center. It worked by taking a portion of an injured individual's body as a medium, from skin cells to hair cells, and converting those cells in order to regenerate missing sections of the body. It required immense chakra control to match the chakra into the proportion of cells, and treatment took a long time. However, it was more than a perfect start for me. With that, I lightly sighed and leaned back on the tree while continuing to slowly flip through the book. There were just some instances where I wanted to sit down, relax, and take it slow. The book in and of itself was interesting enough that I quickly got absorbed into it and continued to read it at a steady pace. My mind eventually drifted as I thought about something else that had been on my mind for a few months now. Reaching level 50. I had found out more about my abilities and the level of my growth as soon as I hit level 50, for example. Before, my HP used to be calculated by my VIT stat multiplied by 50 plus other bonuses. However, upon reaching level 50, I had gotten a few messages from my ability, one of which told me that my base HP would now be calculated by 50 plus vitality asterisk level, instead of the previous 50 plus vitality asterisk 50. And the same thing occurred to my CP growth. More than that, however, I had obtained other messages after reaching level 50 which had given me pause. They allowed me to realize that my ability was much more complex than it had initially seemed, and that I actually didn't know as much about it as I thought I had. Before I could delve deeper into that thought, I suddenly raised my right hand and caught a senbon that had been thrown at me. "You know I can sense you, teacher. Why do you even bother trying? I need to make sure you're always on your guard and not slacking," a voice said before the figure of my trainer, Koto, appeared in front of me. Keeping my gaze on my book, I flipped a page before asking, "And? I doubt you came here just to keep me on guard. Is there something pertinent that requires my attention?" Suddenly, I could feel the atmosphere change around her as it became much more serious. "Well?" I asked, looking at her. "I'm not sure how aware you are about the developments in the war, so I'll give you a brief rundown of what you need to know," she said. I slightly shifted to attention and listened as she continued to speak. "Not long ago, the Tsuchigumo clan formed a pact with the third Hokage due to the fact that the clan's leader, no Gyoja, developed a technique that could wipe out an entire village. By terms of the pact with the third Hokage, and no Gyoja declared the technique to be forbidden, in exchange for protection provided by Konoha in times of need. I do recall hearing something about that. I said, though keeping my eyes in my book, yet I could help but ask, what about the technique made the third Hokage declare it forbidden? Kodo sighed solemnly. From what Lord Danzo explained, it's called Fury, and it utilized natural energy to power the technique. From what I've heard, the damage it caused was quite immense. Suddenly I froze, my hand which had been motioning to turn the page stood still in the air. How? I asked. Seeing her confused look, I elaborated, how exactly is the natural energy gathered for the technique? She looked at me intently before explaining. I recall Lord Danzo mentioning that it was a type of Fuinjutsu seal. As a matter of fact, Minato was his first option to take the mission, but since his team was currently dash. I slammed the book shut, effectively cutting her off before I stood up. What's the mission? She rolled her eyes at my antics before handing me a mission scroll. I quickly opened and memorized the contents in less than a second, after which I tossed it into the air, and went through a few hand seals in rapid succession. I needed my chakra inside my body before converting it to fire and expelling it out of my mouth as a stream of flame towards the scroll, all of this occurring in a seemingly single smooth motion. Fire release, Great Fireball Technique, active, level 40. The Great Fireball Technique allows the user to knead chakra inside their body and convert it into a fire before expelling it from the mouth, either as a massive sphere or as a continuous flamethrower. The scope of this attack is altered by controlling the volume of chakra that is mustered. Maximum range, 80 meters. Damage, 520% ENGY. Cost, 1250 CP. There were only ashes remaining of the mission scroll after my technique ended, so I dusted myself off and started walking forward. Ping. Quest alert. The power of fury. The Tsuchigumo clan has recently come under a series of attacks from small groups of other villages due to their possession of a powerful kenjutsu that could influence the war. Officially, you are to protect them till the attacks subside substantially enough that they can hold their own. Unofficially, you are to obtain the schematics for the technique with your mastery of seals. Objective 1 reward, 300,000 EXP and 50,000 Rio. Objective 2 reward, 100,000 EXP and Fury schematics. Failure, death and or torture. You seem awfully eager to complete this mission, Yoro. Kodo said from behind me, her tone intrigued. You have no idea. That's fine and all. She started before continuing in amusement, but do you even know where you are supposed to go next? I froze mid-step. No. The woman had the audacity to laugh at my predicament before shaking her head. You usually so act much more mature than your age that I sometimes forget that you are still just a kid. My eye twitched. Just lead the way. Sure thing, kiddo, but just make sure to follow behind me. My instructor said as she walked up and ruffled my hair. Before I could slap her hand away, she removed it and chuckled to herself before jumping in the tree lines, so I followed her. Women. Good, you're all here. The Hokage stated as he looked at the forms of Dove, Turtle, me, Boar and his two teammates, Monkey and Tiger, Viper and finally Wolf, all standing at attention while Wolf was still out of commission. We had all come in at around the same time, all prepped with our umbu uniforms and other attire. The Hokage stamped a few pieces of paper before neatly stacking them and laying them on the table. First and foremost, I expect your mission to protect the Tsuchigumo clan to take priority over your other assignment. Is that understood? Yes, Lord Hokage. We immediately chorused. The Hokage nodded in approval. Good, now our client and his personnel are already here, keep yourselves at attention. No sooner did he say that did the door to his office open, allowing 4 discernible forms to enter the room. I quickly scanned all of them with a quick observe and empathy while taking in their forms. The first one notable was a young girl around the age of 12 to 13 who had fair skin, dark green eyes, and long wavy blonde hair with a widow's peak, reaching her back. The girl wore a violet-colored kimono top with white trimmings tied by a black obi. Hataru, Tsuchigumo Shinobi. LVL, 20. Rep, 0. The next individual of note was an elder man who seemed to be in his early 50s or so with long black hair with gray streaks that formed into a mustache and beard. He also had small black eyes and wore a baggy tannish-colored robe. And no Gyoja, Tsuchigumo clan leader. LVL, 90. Rep, 0. Next to him was a man who appeared to be in his late 30s who had short spiked-up black hair. He wore a gray outfit with a silver sleeveless haori which had gray trimmings, a long-sleeve gray shirt inside and long pants, a black bracelet on each wrist, and black shinobi sandals. Hato, Tsuchigumo Shinobi. LVL, 75. Rep, 0. Finally, next to Hato was a young man at around 18 years of age with black shaggy hair with bangs that hung over his eyes and framed both sides of his face and pronounced creases underneath his black eyes. In addition, he was tall and well-muscled, wearing a high-collared blue cloak, a black top that ended mid-chest and dark casual pants. His gaze was calm and seemingly apathetic as he stood there patiently. Shiranami, Tsuchigumo Shinobi. LVL, 65. Rep, -20. I had to prevent my brows from slightly furrowing as I felt the negative emotions coming off of him with my empathy. No sooner did Koto gently place a hand on my back almost to comfort me, however, I knew that was not the case as her fingers rhythmically tapped on my back in certain patterns and durations. Morse code. I thought as I deciphered her message. Koto, what can you feel? I stealthily reached behind my back and tapped the back of her palm with my fingers. Yoru, girl and two older men. Neutral. The younger man. Anger and hatred. She tapped me a few more times. Koto, good, keep a close watch on him. And with that, we went to our former positions, our interaction lasting no more than a few seconds. I had, of course, told Koto about my empathy skill soon after I had gotten it because I knew how important such an ability would be on missions. It could even save a life one day if our ranks were infiltrated, and I sniffed them out, not to mention it made interrogation much easier if I could tell their truths from lies. Some things, however, like the true nature of my full ability, would always remain a secret. The time it took for me to observe them, and for Koto to message me had been no more than a few seconds during which they had also been observing us. And no Gyoja, the clan leader, slightly inclined his head in approval after giving us a more than a cursory glance while stroking his beard. I see, so these shinobi are to be our helping hands against the upcoming storm. I assume they are all well prepared for the adversities ahead? I assure you, they are more than competent for this mission. The Hokage affirmed, fingers interlaced as he rested his hands on his desk. The Tsuchigumo clan leader smiled lightly before slightly inclined his head. Thank you, old friend, for extending your aid in our time of need. There is no need for thanks. The Hokage said, slightly shaking his head yet keeping a small smile on his face. As per our previous arrangement, and as a matter of principle, the leaf will always be there to help your village in its time of need. If there is anything further you need, do let me know. No, we should be able to make do dash. Actually, there is something I'm curious about. A calm-sounding voice spoke up, effectively cutting and no Gyoja off. Shiranami. Hato spoke up, slight irritation visible on his visage. The young man continued nonetheless, is this truthfully the best that the leaf can give us? Even after everything my clan has had to go through because of your war? They even have a child with them. Shiranami, enough. The older male Hato spoke up, his expression now more irritated. We should be grateful for the help we have been offered. You should not be rude towards Dash. No, it's understandable. Hiruzen spoke up before continuing, our forces are quite thin, but I guarantee you that these are some of the finest groups we have. You need not worry about their capabilities. However, here the atmosphere changed as a primal feeling of dread overwhelmed my being. My eyes widened and my body leaked sweat from my pores as the Hokage continued, a calm but dangerous look on his face, and a slightly visible blue aura around him. I would ask that you refrain from speaking out of turn, boy. I could tell that even that kid's impassive visage was cracking as sweat streamed down his face, yet he found the strength to nod nonetheless. Please calm yourself, old friend. Gyoja spoke up with a slight smile on his face, yet I could feel his annoyance at Shiranami, as he explained, you should know how emotional children can become. You will save me face, won't you? Almost immediately the pressure that had been around the room disappeared almost as it had never been there to begin with, and the Hokage returned to his usual genial facade. Of course, children can be unruly at times, which is why it is our duty to teach them discipline. The Tsuchigumo clan head chuckled lightly, which Hiruzen followed, after which he stated, as to your earlier supposition, you have helped us more than enough. We'll be taking our leave as soon as possible. Then I wish you the best, was Hiruzen's reply. Gyoja nodded and turned, walking out of the door, to which the little girl Hotaru, the middle-aged man Hato, and the young man Shiranami followed. Before Shiranami left, however, he gave us all one last look before narrowing his eyes at me and leaving. I looked at his retreating form blandly before thinking, he's such a ball of sunshine. You shouldn't look so distracted, Yoro, it's unlike you. Kodo said beside me as we hopped from tree to tree towards the Tsuchigumo village. I'm never distracted, I stated simply, hopping off another tree and feeling the wind on my face. I could almost feel her roll her eyes as she's replied, I've been with you long enough to know when your blank face is simply blank, or if you're in deep thought, so I know something's been on your mind. That and you were pissing out your pores in the Hokage's office. Funny you should mention that, I started. Because Jay could have sworn, I smelled a little piss on Y-. Yoro, Kodo said heatedly, do not complete that sentence. You really shouldn't be embarrassed, it's a natural biological process that many animals go through. I hastily ducked as a barrage of shuriken flew towards me aimed at my head, and looked back blandly. That's unprofessional. TSK, I was just making sure you were aware of your surroundings, she said with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. I would advise you both not to have a lover's quarrel in the middle of the mission. Wolf's voice sounded out in front of us as she gave us a side glance. It will reflect poorly on us as Konoha shinobi if You know, I sensed you were frustrated earlier in the Hokage's office, and was that shark I smelled on Y-. My eyes widened as a barrage of kunai flew my way, and I immediately substituted myself with a log right before it was shredded by the projectiles. I appeared a few meters away on a tree branch and immediately jumped up as a demon wind shuriken cleaved the tree I had been on. With a small flip, I landed on a tree branch and continued my tree hopping as I looked at Wolf, who was giving me a hard glare. You will not finish that sentence. Women, I thought blandly as we continued onwards at a fast pace. Due to the fact that the Tsuchigumo clan leader was a prime assassination target, boar, monkey, tiger, and viper had gone on ahead with Gyoja and his entourage, in addition with a Kodo clone, since she was such an incredible sensor. With that they could scout for attacks up ahead while we would lag a little behind, but not by much. Just enough where we couldn't see each other, but enough where even I could sense them. Before I could ruminate any further, I heard Kodo speak up from behind me, her tone serious. It seems like we won't have such an easy mission this time around. Small party of around 6 all around low jonin levels. Geez. Turtle, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke up. I can't believe that they're already willing to send such high-grade ninjas. We, unfortunately, don't have much time to worry about that, Kodo said, looking up at the sky for a moment before continuing. Turtle, send one forward to warn the others that they are coming from R9. We should be able to hold them off, or even beat them if we play this right. The man nodded and sent a clone ahead before Wolf spoke up. I believe that we should ambush them before they come towards us. It seems like they are expecting to see us, but not expecting us to see them. Correct me if I'm wrong. Kodo shook her head. No, you are correct. From their trajectory they seem to know our general area, but nowhere concrete. We can use this against them quite easily and pick them apart. With that said, she landed on a branch to a stop. We all followed suit after her before Kodo stated, "Follow my lead and stay close. You should be able to sense them by now, right, Yoro?" At my nod, she continued, "Good, you'll lead with me." And with it she leaped ahead towards our enemy's general direction, prompting us to follow. Within a few seconds we crossed the kilometer gap separating us and our enemies, but right before we made contact, Kodo suddenly split one direction, and I split another, turtle and wolf following her and me respectively. I flashed a few hand signals telling Wolf to wait for just a moment, and no sooner did I see multiple figures jump right ahead of me, all in black clothing and with umbu masks on. Kirigakure. I thought as I saw the mask designs, but I didn't question it any further and quickly charged lightning in my hands before releasing a beam of electricity in the form of my lightning strike from my palms. All without hand seals. The sudden attack blew one of them from midair, as the individual crashed through multiple trees and came to a stop. -6,505. HP, 23495/30,000. Enemy attack. One of them yelled, however before they could regroup, a blur flashed by and brutally slammed itself against one of the enemy shinobi, throwing him her far away. That was soon followed by a volley of Senbon, courtesy of Kodo, that rained down upon the remaining 4 individuals, who all split up in order to avoid the needles. Before they could even get their bearings, Wolf finally moved forward agilely and slashed at 2 of the unsuspecting enemies with her tanto. I decided to quickly focus my attention on the remaining 2 Kiriumbu and slipped into stance, while also remembering about the one I had attacked earlier. With a kunai in hand, I dashed forward towards one of the enemies, Kodo having moved to engage the other, but before we could make contact, both of them expelled mist from their mouths, which quickly spread to the surroundings. The hiding in mist technique. This is somewhat troublesome, I thought as I tightly gripped my kunai and turned my head to look all around me. The issue with this jutsu was that the mist was created by the user's chakra, and so since their chakra was pretty much everywhere around me, I could not accurately sense their energy resonance with the surroundings. However, I said as I jumped to get an aerial view of the battlefield, "I can still feel your emotions." Without missing a beat, I flipped through 5 hand seals while inhaling air into my lungs and molding my chakra. Wind release, great breakthrough. Wind release, great breakthrough, active, LVL 38, 65.25%. The wind release, great breakthrough is a technique that creates a gust of wind, whose scale and usage varies depending on the user. Maximum range, 114 meters. Damage, 570% ENGY. Cost, 1500 CP. With a thought, I expelled a gale of wind from my mouth which quickly blew the mist away. What I saw, while gravity took a hold on me, was a battlefield devoid of enemies, only Kodo and Wolf visible on the ground floor. I landed softly on the ground while noting that they were out of my detection range. I looked at Kodo, who shook her head in the negative. I can sense their retreating chakra signatures, but it would be unwise to go after them, especially since they're heading the opposite direction. We've already warned the team ahead, so what we can do now is catch up and dash. I'm back, and what did I miss? Turtle said as he ran into the clearing, noting our forms. Our enemies escaped, and it is now imperative that we catch up to the main group. Wolf said as she sheathed her tanto and looked at Turtle. How about yours? Well, the man started, scratching his head. He turned his body to water and just disappeared in the soil. I kind of didn't expect that, so I was at a loss. Wolf nodded. It seems like this job is going to be a long one. Turtle, you think you can lead us to the group with your clone that went ahead earlier? I'm sure they must be out of your range by now, Dove. Kodo nodded. Unfortunately so. While we do know the routes they are taking, it's safe to assume they may have chosen to deviate due to our warning. It's best to err on the side of caution. No worries. Turtle said before closing his eyes and opening them a second later. I just dispelled it. Follow me. He jumped up to the trees and, likely using the information he got from his clone, lead us through the forest. We vigilantly made our way towards the other group, making sure to be acutely aware of our surroundings. In little time we eventually caught up with the other group up front. I noted how their previously tensed forms relaxed as they saw our figures. Furthermore, they were stationary in a clearing of the forest. We figured something must have happened when you dispelled your clone turtle, but seeing as Dove's clone was still here, we didn't really have to worry. Boar said with a light sigh before he scanned us once more. Regardless, I'm glad you all are alright. Likewise. Koto said before dispelling her clone. Though I have to ask why you decided to pause here? With enemies on our trail, it's imperative we get to our destination quicker. We would have continued on, but... Boar nodded his head to the side towards the individuals from Tsuchigumo, more specifically, Hotaru. The little one got tired. I figured I would wait for you guys as reinforcements and continue with her on my back. Now that he mentioned it, she was really flushed in the face. Koto sighed and tried to pinch the bridge of her nose, before remembering she had a mask on. Really, why didn't you just do that before? At Boar's somewhat sheepish expression, she looked at the Tsuchigumo clan leader, who had most likely been listening in. Why exactly did you bring an untrained child here in the first place? She would have been much safer in the confines of your village walls. That. The clan leader seemed to pick his words carefully as he explained, she's too important to be without my supervision. Koto gave him a look for a moment before shaking her head. Fine, but she'll only slow us down on her own 2 feet. Boar. The bulky man nodded and went on one knee, his back facing the girl. Come on kiddo, let's get you home quickly. Hotaru looked at no Gyoja, who nodded his head. She then shyly climbed up Boar's back, causing Koto to state, alright, let's get a move on. There are no enemies within my detection range, but that may change soon. With that, she jumped up into the trees with the rest of us right behind her. I focused on the emotions that the Tsuchigumo shinobi were outputting, more specifically, the ones Shiranami was projecting. Absolutely nothing. Aside from the tingle of negativity he seemed to have, there was no inward or outward change in his emotions that I could sense. He was just calm. It wasn't weird or suspicious, but I had to note that even no Gyoja and Hato had emotions of worry, most likely from the fact that enemies had already started coming after them, no need to mention Hotaru, who was inwardly very frightened. I shook my head, there are more important things. I thought as I continued to move along the trees. I just had to remain vigilant and keep my guard up against as many eventualities as I could. In little time and without much suspense, we appeared in front of the village doors. With a simple signal from the village leader who was traveling with us, the guards allowed us into the village gates. As we walked down the streets, my empathy picked up trace amounts of, well, not hatred, but slight animosity from most of the village residents. Before I could dwell on it any further, we suddenly stopped in front of a small building. I would first like to extend my thanks for your assistance. And no Gyoja stayed before gesturing towards the building. This will be your place of residence for the time being. I apologize that it isn't much, however. Master Gyoja. A voice yelled, causing us all to turn to the source. There I saw a slightly above middle-aged man with a bristling mustache and dark eyes. He wore a simple V-neck, long-sleeved shirt with a sleeveless coat, a pair of pants and sandals. Tunbi. Gyoja stated as the man approached. The dark-eyed man nodded his head. I just received word that you returned, so I hurried here as quickly as I could. How is Lady Hotaru? The Tsuchigumo clan leader gestured towards Boar, who was carrying the sleeping form of the blonde-haired girl on his back. I see. Tunbi stated, before looking at us all. I thank you for your assistance, but if you would be so kind. Boar nodded and gently handed over Hotaru's sleeping form to the man, who replied gratefully, thank you again for your aid. With that said, the man left, allowing Gyoja to continue where he left off. As I was saying, it may not be much, but it has enough rooms to accommodate you all. Here he sighed before explaining, the frequency of attacks has been increasing, causing much of our previous infrastructure to be destroyed. Please be on alert. We will and thank you for your hospitality. My teacher spoke up, eliciting nods of agreement from the rest of us. Gyoja responded in kind and looked towards Hato and Shiranami before leaving the premises, the other two individuals following behind. With that, we entered the building and admired its interior before moving to the living room area. Entering this part of the building, I looked at the wall of the living room and noticed a dragon mural hung up on the wall. That's an interesting piece of art, Turtle said as he looked at the dragon head that was framed up on the wall. I nodded my head in agreement but couldn't help but feel something off about it. Weird. Another day. Another mission. Viper said as he took off his mask, placed it on the table, and plopped on the couch. This is the way of life we chose, or are you having second thoughts? Wolf asked as she followed suit and took off her umbu mask as well. I and the rest of the umbu here did the same before Viper replied, it's not that, it's just, sometimes I just want a vacation, you know. Go to a foreign land, meet a foreign woman, get to know that foreign woman, maybe get laid by said woman, you know what I mean. No was her dull reply. Viper rolled his eyes, oh right, I forgot, you already have your boy toy to play, why whoa. He said as he jumped up from his seat, just in time to dodge the shuriken that embedded themselves on the chair he had been on. As if she had done something insignificant, Wolf sat down on the tatami mat, legs crossed, and asked, so, what's the plan this time around? I suppose we can proceed as usual. Boar said as he too plopped down on the floor. With us all eventually sitting in our most comfortable positions, Koto then replied, so I create scouting clones and we all react to any unforeseen circumstances they detect. She then shrugged, I suppose that's best for this mission anyway. I would also advise keeping an eye on the villagers as they don't seem to hold goodwill towards us. I stated, centralizing the attention on me. A lot of people don't like us. Turtle stated. It comes with the job. I'm aware. I replied. But it's best to be safe and exercise caution. Don't worry your sweet little head about that kid. Viper said calmly, though his body language indicated he was ready to jump at a moment's notice. You're practically preaching to the choir. With that said, he kept whisking glances at Wolf, who glared at him in return, causing him to flinch back. Anyway. Boar started as he got up and stretched, keep your eyes peeled and don't lower your guard, like usual. I'm going to get some shut-eye, so wake me up if something happens. With that, he left the living area and went about the house to go to his room. Watching the guy leave, Viper couldn't help but comment, I'm telling you guys that it's the sexual tension. I mean look, Boar never gets tired. If you're so desperate for action, just go to a brothel. You're acting like a desperate starved dog. Monkey, one of Boar's subordinates, stated as he stood up. I'll be semi-conscious, so give me a tap if you need me. Following him as he made his way out was Tiger, leaving Koto, Turtle, Wolf, Viper, and me here. If you all need to sleep, feel free to do so. I stated at them, I don't need it, and I need to keep myself alert anyway since I'm a censor. I'll shamelessly take you up on your offer. Turtle stated as he too got up. Sorry to take advantage of you like this, kid, but I really haven't gotten any good sleep in a while. No worries. It'll be best if you all are at your peak anyway. Ah, thanks, kid, you're a lifesaver. He said before patting my head and walking away. I can't say I trust you with my life, but I trust you enough to keep a good lookout. Wolf stated as she stood. Well, I'm off. Hopefully, I see you all tomorrow and not in the middle of the night. Well, unlike her. Koto started as she pushed herself off the wall she had been leaning on. I do trust you with my life. So do me a favor and don't get me killed, okay? She said with a wink before leaving. And then there were two. Viper stated as he looked at the direction my teacher and Wolf had left before breathing a sigh. You aren't going to sleep? I asked, noting how Viper seemed to be in thought. I really can't. He said with a sigh, it's been a while since I've had a woman to be with. Maybe Monkey was onto something. He put on a thoughtful expression and muttered to himself before looking at me with narrowed eyes and stroking his chin. Hey Yoro? You've never been to a brothel, am I right? I blinked. Twice. I mean, I'm 7.5 so. Great. He said, clapping his hands before rubbing them together. How would you like to experience the other adult aspects of shinobi life, let's say, seduction? I gave him a blank look. I'm 7. Oh, don't be like that, girls dig cute kids. He looked at me pleadingly before getting on his knees. Please Yoro, you have to help me. He smiled. I sighed. Fine. I'll leave a clone here and go with you. Just stop acting so pathetic. I needed to do recon anyway, so this is as good of an excuse as any. The man smiled before thrusting a fist in the air. Yes. Thanks, kid, I promise you won't regret it. I looked up to the ceiling. I hope so. Ah. He's so cute. He really is. Look at those pretty silver eyes. And his mask too. So mysterious. Ladies. Viper stated as he raised his hands in a placating manner. Don't crowd around him like that or you'll scare my little bro. One of the brothel ladies looked at both me and Viper, likely noting the not-so-subtle differences in our skin tone, but you two don't even look alike. Adopted. Viper said offhandedly before giving, or at least trying to, a charming smile and placing his hands around two of the women. Now then, why don't we go someplace more private? The women giggled and felt upon the man before dragging him off to a closed curtained area and disappearing from view. I sighed. What a lost cause. I stood up and looked around, listening to the music, whistles, and cheers of the surroundings. I had sent some clones to survey the village earlier in order to check for weaknesses in this place's defense. Additionally, there was a clone back at our temporary residence in order to monitor the area just in case. With these thoughts, I gave the surroundings one more cursory glance before I paused and narrowed my eyes in a certain direction. Did I see that correctly, that hair, and his immense chakra? I thought as I tried to look past the crowd of people, but unfortunately, I was still young and therefore short. I sighed softly before closing my eyes and focusing my enhanced hearing in that direction. Ha ha ha, ladies, please, there's only one of me and so many of you. Why don't you come at me one at a time? Didn't you say you were a legendary shinobi? What, is a few women too much for you to handle, Mr. Powerful Shinobi? Or were you just all bark? All bark. The first voice said, ladies, I'll have you know that I'm one of the strongest ninjas in my village. Even my other two teammates pale in comparison. Oh yeah? Why don't you show us then? If you're such a strong ninja, then 5 women shouldn't be too much to handle. You can even be as rough as you want. Please hurry up. Hee, I'm going to have to teach you ladies never to underestimate a Sannin. Now, how about we start by dash? And with that, I stopped listening and blinked in thought. That can't possibly be, but who else? And why here? Well, at least this gives me something to do. And so, since I wasn't going to get any answers sitting down, I stood up and followed the sounds of perverted giggling. Granted, there was a lot of that here, so it took a while, and stood before a curtained room. A simple genjutsu made me invisible to the crowd, preventing any heads from turning at the sight of a 7-year-old in a brothel. Though, considering I had seen some rag-dressed children around, suffice to say that my presence would not have turned too many heads. Then again, I was too good-looking for my own safety. With those thoughts out of the way, I opened the curtain and peered into the room. Jiraiya of the Sannin. I confirmed as I saw the visage of the man who looked to be in his early 30s. My intrusion disrupted their laughter as all 6 heads turned towards me. A kid? One of the women said. And he looks so cute. Ah. Look at his beautiful eyes. Ignoring the fawning women, I turned my gaze towards Jiraiya, whose eye twitched continuously while looking at me, and I heard him mutter, just when we were getting to the good part too. Ignoring that, I pulled down my mask, causing the occupants of the room to gasp. Oh my god, so cute. Look how pretty his face is. If only he was 10 years older. Jiraiya's eyes twitched again. I sighed. Who would have thought being cute would be so troublesome? So, I ignored the peanut gallery and opened my mouth, showing Jiraiya my tongue for just a moment before putting my mask back on. His face tightened at seeing the cursed tongue eradication seal given to me by Danzo before I slightly bowed and made my way out, though not before hearing Jiraiya say to the women, "Well, shall we continue?" As I waited in the area I had been in before meeting Jiraiya, I noted that the curtain to Viper's area opened with the women exiting soon after. As soon as they saw me, their smile brightened while Viper's looked somewhat strained. "I'll see you again maybe?" Viper asked the women hopefully. "As long as you bring him with you next time. I mean, your adopted brother is just so adorable. I won't mind seeing him again in 10 years, but by that time." Viper's facade began to crumble, but not before the women left blowing me a kiss along the way. "It's all your fault," Viper said, giving me the stink eye. I raised a brow. "What exactly?" Viper clenched his fists in frustration before giving me a hard look. "All they wanted to do was talk about you. Your adopted brother is so cute. Or how old is he? Or why does he wear a face mask? And one even had the opacity to say tell him to visit again when he's older. I mean, what the hell? You're 7. Why would anyone find you sexually appealing? They don't even know what your face looks like. Hell, I don't even know what your face looks like." I watched as the man raged about before I couldn't help but comment, "Maybe they just didn't find you as charming and your fake smile definitely didn't help. Just be a better human being next time or something. I'm going home," Viper said dejectedly as he slumped towards the exit, causing me to sigh before following him. After exiting the establishment, I told Viper, "Be careful on your way back, I have to stay here for something." He gave me a lazy wave, still in his dejected state. With that, he continued to walk away back towards our place of temporary residence, leaving me to wait outside the brothel. With a tap of my feet, I found myself on the roof of the building and decided to take some time to practice my meditation. It took 30 minutes before I opened my eyes and stated, "Lord Jiraiya, it took you a while." What can I say? The women just didn't want to leave the handsome and gallant Master Jiraiya alone. Well, I don't expect a child such as yourself to possibly understand, the man said offhandedly. What I understand, I said, before turning around, is that they were doing their job. That got him to regard me seriously. I've been out and about away from the village for a while, so I'm not up to date on what's been going on in the village, but... He looked me up and down. I had no idea Danzo was picking them younger. A product of the circumstances, I said blandly. The reason why I'm here and why I assume you're here as well. Jiraiya rubbed his chin. I suppose that's true. With that, he placed his hands to his sides and looked at me through half-lidded eyes. So, was there a reason you disturbed me from my job? You should know by now that the shadiest parts of town always have the brightest information flow. I slightly nodded my head. I simply wished to confirm if your mission was in conflict or cohort with ours, and if you would want us to develop new plans taking your presence into consideration. The white-haired man raised a brow. You're a really diligent kid, you know. Reminds me of that brat I taught, though you're much more uptight than he is. He shook his head. The only reason I'm here was that I was around the area and a contact told me about the peculiarities of this clan's kenjutsu. Needless to say, I couldn't just sit still after that, so I decided to see if I could get information on which individuals in this clan had access to it. That's part of my team's secondary mission, I stated before asking, have you found anything useful then? Nothing substantial yet. Jiraiya paused and rummaged his pockets before taking out a scroll and tossing it to me. A list of names and addresses of the higher-ranking members of the Tsuchigumo clan. Not all of them have access to the kenjutsu, but a good majority do. Thank you, I stated before putting the scroll in my inventory. What do you plan to do now, Lord Jiraiya? I'll be around the area. After all, I have to make sure your team properly secures the objective. In the meantime, I'll see what other information I can obtain. I see, thank you, I said with a short bow. Jiraiya waved me off. No need, kid, it's part of our job anyway. Anything else? I paused for a moment before I thought of something. As a matter of fact, there is. Oh? The white-haired Sannin asked with a brow raised. I looked at him plainly. Shiranami, he seems to be the son of the man named Hato, and I believe he is well respected around here. If it wouldn't be too much to ask, could you put some surveillance around him? Jiraiya narrowed his eyes. An enemy? I can't be sure yet. I started, before continuing, but he is hostile towards the Leaf and his father seems to be in a high position in this village. I would feel more secure as I knew what he was doing behind my back. I see. The Sannin stated before nodding. Very well, I'll watch him, and let you know if anything pops up. Thank you, I said quietly. As I said before, it's part of the job. Jiraiya replied with a slight smile. All right, good night, kid. And a moment later, he disappeared into a swirl of leaves. I looked at the spot he had disappeared from before standing up and dusting myself off. I looked up into the night sky and ran through a couple things in my mind before I was snapped out of my reverie from the dispelling of my clones. They completely mapped out the place. I thought as I reviewed my clones' memories and made a mental map of the relatively small hidden village. With this information, it would be easier for me to locate the individuals on Jiraiya's list. I looked up at the night sky and thought, I suppose I should get back. Before I jumped from the building to the next, and made my way back towards my group's place of residence. After arriving and entering the building, I felt around with my empathy, and promptly regretted it. They all need to get laid. I thought as I felt from them some deeply amorous emotions. I was pretty sure they were all sleeping, and I couldn't pinpoint which individuals had those feelings, but it felt really odd for me to feel the sexual frustrations they were experiencing. I was only 7 after all. Regardless, I sat down and reduced the range of empathy to just the surface of my skin before opening my inventory and taking out the scroll Jiraiya had given me. With a quick read-through, I memorized the names on the list and placed it back in my inventory for later. I would let the others know about this information tomorrow in the morning. For now though, I would be keeping watch. With a light sigh, I rested on the couch in a comfortable position and began to practice meditation. I had never once stopped thinking about that man I had met that day. There was no doubt in my mind that he knew why I was here and he had the answers to many of my questions about my faulty memory and more importantly, who he was. Level 100 meditation, huh? I thought. I had never forgotten what he told me, and I had been working towards meeting him again, but this skill hadn't made it easy. Compared to many of the other skills I had been training with, it leveled up much slower in its later stages, and I wouldn't be surprised if it took me another couple years before I could get to my goal. However, nothing worth getting comes easy. Chapter 11. Where is this? I thought, or possibly said as I looked around at my surroundings. I was floating in an endless sea of darkness with no exit in sight, so I turned to look around and see if there was anything here. This place feels familiar. Have I been here before? I said to myself, my astral body floating up and down as I put on a thoughtful expression. Suddenly, I paused and squinted my eyes as I saw a glitter or a sparkle some distance away, like a star in the night sky. Immediately after, more stars appeared in my view until the darkness was filled with them. What? Before I could even complete my thoughts, I felt a pull and my visual perspective began to change as if I was traveling at warp speed. I didn't get to contemplate any further as I suddenly stopped and around me was. My eyes magnified. How could it not? What is this? Surrounding my body, floating in the void, were numerous green crystals hanging off of a thick luminescent branch. That connected them all. Each crystal depicted fantastical scenes that even had me gazing in some wonder. A man in a high-tech suit of red armor was flying a missile towards a portal in the air. It detonated, sending his body crashing towards the ground, but also closing the spatial anomaly. Suddenly, my perspective changed as I was shifted to another area that had green crystals. A normal-looking brown-haired boy and a blue-haired beautiful woman drinking beer at a bar with many people joining in the festivities, and the girl throwing up rainbows after. Once more, my body shifted to another area. A brown-haired boy getting stabbed in the chest with a lance of light, a girl with black feathered wings looking down at him condescendingly. And again, my perspective changed. A gigantic red beast with glowing red markings over its body fighting a giant blue whale with glowing markings all over its body. The red beast changed the landscapes with his attacks while the blue whale altered the seas, and even though I wasn't there, I could almost feel continental, no planetary levels of energy being released from their attacks. I knew that if they so much as breathed in my general direction, I would die. And again. Another scene depicted a group of individuals huddled around in a circle, their hands interlocked, and above them was a black dragon, who seemed to be radiating an immense amount of energy, not nearly as much as the red beast and the blue whale, but it was impressive nonetheless, and would still easily kill me. The black dragon sucked in a breath and released a powerful blast of energy towards the group of individuals before the scene reset, not allowing me to know the outcome. Again and again, my perspective shifted as my body traveled to numerous different crystals, each one depicting different scenes. The settings were either intense or mellow, some would be considered heart-rendering if I wasn't so emotionally stunted. As I sifted through the numerous floating crystals, I immediately froze. Cold sweat began to seep from my astral form as a large crystal became prominent in my vision. Death. Destruction. Individuals fighting for their home. Women mourning their deceased husbands. Terror. Panic. A giant beast was in my view, its 9 tails waving around, each swing causing small hurricanes to form, buildings to be destroyed, and people to lose their lives. The 9 tails. I reached forward to touch the screen as I saw the beast wreaking havoc on what was no doubt Konoha, the Hokage monuments clearly visible in the background. Immediately, I was pulled away, and the glittering crystals became further and further away from my view before darkness took a hold me once more. Congratulations! Meditation has leveled up by 1. Meditation, active, LVL 86, 48.67%. Meditation is a skill created through continuous inner focus. Meditation helps to sharpen focus and order thoughts, and it increases clarity of mind and awareness of the body. Passively increase INT by 172%. Passively increase WIS by 172%. Passively increase ENGY by 172%. HP and CP regeneration increase by 860% when active. Note, cannot be activated during combat. At higher levels, you are able to better sit still, and the rate of HP and CP regeneration increases. I immediately snapped my eyes open and took deep breaths, before placing a palm over my face while in thought. That was not a dream. It was a statement of fact because ever since I had been in this world, I had never once dreamt. I wasn't sure if it was because of Gamer's mind or because of that guy who seemed to inhabit my soul, but not once had I ever dreamt. Therefore, those scenes, that environment, were real. I was familiar with some of the scenes depicted in those screens, but I still couldn't remember the entire background or the worlds they came from. More importantly, the 9 tails, was that real? Is that something that could happen or will happen? So many thoughts went through my mind at the scene, but I shook my head. I don't even know if or when it will happen. Furthermore, the 9 tails is in Kushina as of this moment. If she becomes pregnant again, I will have to let her know to be extra careful. With that, I stopped my musings and thought of the positives, like how I had finally leveled up my meditation skill. It was as if I had broken through some sort of mental barrier or something. It's about time. It only took me a month and a half. I thought while cracking my neck before looking out the window and gazing at the slowly rising sun. It's about time they wake up. I said aloud and snapped my finger, creating a clone besides me. It went to wake up my teammates, allowing me time to get up and stretch my limbs before the area became crowded. A few moments later, I could feel the churning of emotions coming from my teammates, signaling that they were waking. I sat back down on the couch, but no sooner did I feel a chakra signature nearby. "Fun night?" The voice of Koto asked as she plopped down next to me. It was fine. She opened her mouth to comment, but the voice of Viper replied before she could, effectively cutting her off. "Oh, no doubt for you it was fine. Lady Snatcher." The man had slightly red eyes from what appeared to be lack of sleep and looked at me with a slight grimace. Koto raised a brow at that statement, "Lady Snatcher?" Viper widened his eyes for a moment before stuttering, "WL, last night dash." I sighed. "He took me to a brothel." Instantly the air coagulated. "What?" Koto asked, eyes narrowing as she looked at Viper. Before the man could reply, the voice of Wolf sounded out, "What exactly are you teaching children, Viper?" I turned to the sound, having already noted her presence along with that of Turtle, Boar, and the rest. "You guys have been there a while. Don't mind me, I'm just enjoying the show. It'll probably be the only interesting thing to happen today anyway," was Turtle's uncaring reply. Boar merely sighed and his two teammates watched on tentatively. And with that, all the attention centralized upon Viper's slightly sweating and nervous form. Wait, there was actually a really good reason I went there. "Oh?" Koto questioned. "Do tell." Wolf asked. "Remember the mission detail?" He said quickly, "We were told to rendezvous with Jiraiya of the Sannin in order to obtain some information he collected. And since everyone is aware of the type of man he is, I thought that the brothel would be a good place to start." At that, both women halted their glares, but I blinked. "Wait, we were supposed to meet with him?" I was not aware of this. I honestly believed that Jiraiya had been moving separately and had been on his own mission. I didn't know our groups were meant to meet. "You didn't tell him?" Turtle asked Koto in speculation. The woman thought for a moment before shrugging. "Well, it's his own fault that I forgot to mention it, don't put the blame on me." I slightly tilted my head and pointed at my face. "Me? Oh, stop with the innocent act." Koto replied with a roll of her eyes. "I remember now that I was going to explain that part of the mission to you after telling you how Minato wasn't available, but you got too excited and cut me off before I could explain. After that," she shrugged and finished, "I simply forgot about it afterward until now." I paused as the memory resurfaced in my mind. I recall Lord Danzo mentioning that it was a type of Fuinjutsu seal. As a matter of fact, Minato was his first option to take the mission, but since his team was on a dash. I slammed the book shut, effectively cutting her off before I stood up. "What's the mission?" "Huh?" Koto rolled her eyes at me before she turned back to Viper, who had been slowly inching away. "Don't think I forgot about you." Viper froze, allowing my teacher to continue. "Since you say you went there to meet up with Jiraiya, then surely you must have gotten some important piece of information to share with us." I stared at the man with full eyes as sweat seeped from his pores. Well, he apparently wasn't in yesterday, so dash. "Here it is," I said, handing the scroll that Jiraiya had given me to Koto. Once again, the air froze. "I hope you thoroughly enjoyed your time there by Kuan. Wolf said with a smile that didn't quite seem right, causing the man to back away. As she moved closer to him one step at a time, he looked towards me before mouthing the word traitor, to which I gave him a blank look, and give him the sign language for "you are pathetic." However, before anything could happen, Koto and I suddenly turned to the door, our movements attracting the attention of the rest of the occupants. "What's wrong?" Boar asked, noting our reactions. Koto tilted her head towards the door and I supplied, "It's a non-hostile and slightly familiar chakra signature." I supplemented. Before anyone could contemplate further, there was a knock on the door. "Consider yourself lucky," Wolf stated before walking towards the door. We'll continue this conversation later. Viper shivered slightly at her tone, but seeing his pathetic state made me wonder, do all men grow up to have some irrational fear of women that makes them so unsightly? Or does Wolf simply have both her teammates whipped? I wonder if Boar and Turtle have some irrational fears. Food for thought. As my odd thoughts concluded, Wolf opened the door, revealing the figure of the man who had carried off that little girl Hotaru from Boar. Tunbi, if I'm not mistaken. What am I saying? I have eidetic memory. What is it? Wolf asked succinctly. The man replied in a calm manner, Lord Gyoja would like to formally invite you to breakfast. He figured that as elite shinobi, you would be up around this time, so he sent me here to let you know. Here, Boar stepped up, we gladly accept your invitation. Tunbi nodded and took a scroll out from his shirt, just follow the directions on that scroll. We will be eating in about 45 minutes. And with that, the man gave a slight bow before walking away. Boar examined the scroll for a moment before looking at Kodo. Anything? There's no residual chakra coming from it. Kodo said as she closed her eyes in focus. Boar nodded before looking at me, so I shook my head in the negative. I felt no malice from the man and I don't sense anything from the scroll. It should be all clear. Boar seemed satisfied with that as he tucked the scroll away. We can never be too careful in a foreign land, especially with the unfriendly atmosphere here. Did their non-existent standing ovation at our arrival give that away? Monkey said somewhat sarcastically. True, they certainly didn't seem that happy to see us. Turtle said with a thoughtful expression. At the end of the day, we should simply keep our guard up. Saying this, Boar turned back to my teacher. More importantly, what is the information that Lord Jiraiya gave us? The names and addresses of all the influential individuals who might have access to what we are looking for. I replied, centralizing the attention on me. I had my clones scout yesterday and comparing their knowledge with the information Lord Jiraiya gave, all these individuals seem to live in the high-class residential district in the center of town. That should also be where the village leader, and no Gyoja, lives. While I had been explaining this, Kodo had already spread out the scroll on a table, allowing everyone to see and memorize the names on the list. This is pretty good timing. My teacher said. Since we are heading there in a few anyways, we can take some time to memorize the landscape. As everyone nodded in agreement, I took a step back and sat on the ground before taking out a large piece of blank paper, my Fuinjutsu paintbrush, and a storage seal filled with ink. Yoru? Kodo asked speculatively. I had my clones survey the area beforehand with all their collected information being stored in here. I said, pointing to my head. I dipped my brush on the ink storage seal before carefully drawing on the blank sheet of paper. With the incredible calligraphy skills I had developed for Fuinjutsu coupled with my rapid improvement, I was able to accurately draw out the mental image of the Tsuchigumo village onto the paper. With my eidetic memory, I cross-referenced the names and addresses of the individuals on Jiraiya's list with the information my clones had gathered. I circled those areas on my makeshift map and put a star on top of my group's current position. This here is our current position, I said, pointing at the star. And this here should be the high-class residential district where we should be headed towards. I concluded, dragging my finger towards the multiple circles in the center of town. At that, Boar pulled out the map given to him by Tunbi and cross-referenced it to the one I had drawn. The one I have had certain key points omitted from it and only leads me straight to the village leader's home, but other than that, it's a perfect match. Boar said, before patting my head a couple of times, good work, kid. I nodded my head, I'm just doing my job. Boar smirked before looking at the rest of us. All right then, get ready and look presentable for our audience with the village leader. We'll leave in 20. As everyone went their separate ways to get changed, I looked at Kodo. What exactly should I wear? Just don't look like a bum, was her reply. Don't think too much about it, and wear whatever makes you feel comfortable. Just make sure it's not inappropriate. And with that, she stood up and disappeared to her room. And so I nodded my head, and put on a thoughtful expression. I suppose I'll go casual. Fresh produce from Tsuchigumo soil. I guarantee it tastes delicious. Freshly butchered meat. Get your freshly butchered meat here. Imported herbs and spices from the land of spices. Whole grain rice from the land of rice. I turn my head towards the different merchants who were advertising and listened to the hustle and bustle of the early morning Tsuchigumo atmosphere. I was currently in a pair of black sweatpants, a long-sleeved black shirt with extra cloth near the neck area to function as a face mask, and a pair of simple lightweight dark shoes. This place is quite lively in the morning, isn't it? Koto asked no one in particular as she walked beside me. That's quite true. Kazumona, also known as Wolf, stated, waving the small fan she had in her hand. This atmosphere isn't too bad. Regardless, Tsukio, aka Boar, began. Remember to be on high alert and observe your surroundings. We all nodded at that and continued towards our destination. Since this was a somewhat formal thing, we didn't have our umbu masks or clothing with us, but I had no doubt that everyone was still carrying weapons somewhere on their person. Kazumona's fan, for example, was a miniature version of the battle fan Suna wine style users used. If she channeled a little bit of wind nature chakra through it while waving, it could still easily cut up a normal person and cause substantial body damage to the surroundings. As shinobi, it was expected of us to always be ready for battle, so as long as we weren't waving around kunai like fools, even if the village leader knew we were stashing weapons, he would turn a blind eye. It wasn't like he was defenseless anyway. Plus, we were allies. We're here, Boar said, causing us all to stop in our tracks. In front of us was a large, traditional-style, single-story Japanese house. In front of the door were two Tsuchigumo shinobi who noticed us and motioned for us to halt. State your purpose. Boar reached into the sleeve of his shirt and pulled out the scroll Tunbi had given him while replying, "We were invited." The second guard took the scroll and read through it for a moment before seeing something he supposedly liked and nodding his head towards the first guard. "Master Gyoja awaits your presence. The dining area will be visible as soon as you enter," he said before opening the door and stepping away, his companion following suit. After we came in, we took off our shoes and made our way towards the dining room that was in view of the entrance. As soon as we arrived at the dining area, I took a quick sweep of the surroundings, noting there were only familiar faces around the table along with 8 open seats. There was Tunbi, the little blonde girl Hataru, Hato, and his son Shiranami. "Welcome," the village leader stated before gesturing towards the empty spots. "Please, do sit." With a short bow, we made our way towards the empty spots and sat around the table, food having already been prepared for the occasion. "You all shouldn't be so uptight," the man said, grabbing a handful of fresh fruit. "This isn't anything too formal after all." With that said, our reservations lowered a little and everyone began to grab food and eat, though it was done in relative silence. I took this moment to observe everyone around us and noted that their emotions were quite reserved, and even Shiranami's previous hostility was replaced with more cold indifference. At least he's calmed down a little, I thought before blinking as I felt a gaze on my face. I turned to the source and noticed that the little blonde-haired girl was looking at me with a peculiar gaze, causing me to ask, "Is there something on my face?" Hataru knitted her brows cutely before asking, "How can you eat with that mask on?" "Oh, that little trick. Still though," I thought before refocusing on the bowl of rice I had been eating, "it's a secret." "Humph, fine, be that way," the girl said, crossing her arms, but then she looked at me more closely and with narrowed eyes. "Why do you wear a mask? Did something happen to your face?" After swallowing the food in my mouth, I replied, "Because it looks cool." Puffed, puffed. Koto suddenly laughed before coughing lightly into her hand. "Sorry, that was disrespectful of me." However, it seemed as if Hataru's interaction with me had softened up the mood slightly as the leader waved his hand dismissively with a smile. "Don't mind it one bit, the young are always amusing to watch." With that, the tension completely dissipated, causing Tsukio to state, "I have to say, Your village is very lively and high-spirited, not at all like a village that has been under attack. It makes me wonder if we were even needed here." The clan leader chuckled lightly while stroking his beard. "It's true that if you simply take a look around the village, there seems to be no fear in the hearts of my villagers, however," Gyoja said, sighing. "Underneath their assured smiles and carefree actions, I know that their hearts are uneasy." There was a moment of awkward silence following his statement, the sounds of chopsticks to plates audible to the ears. "There goes the mood," I thought while eating silently. However, no sooner did the man give a short, loud laugh before stating, "Well, I believe in your Kage's insight. If he chose your team for the job, then I trust that you'll be more than capable of helping my clan." That seemed to ease the awkwardness a little as Tsukiyo replied with a slight smile, "I thank you for your confidence in our abilities. We'll do our utmost to help your village against these attacks." The jovial atmosphere, however, was short-lived. "Whose fault do you think this is?" a voice quietly said, but loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Gyoja sighed lightly while Hato looked at his son reproachfully, but with a sorrowful gaze. "Shiranami, I understand your pain more than any time else, however. However, what?" the boy said heatedly, his knuckles turning white from his clenched fists. "Understanding my pain won't bring her back," he exclaimed. "Then what?" Hato replied, his voice increasing in volume. "What do you want us to do? What do you want me to do?" Shiranami took a calming breath before looking at my group sternly, the emotion vanishing from his face. "For starters, we could begin by not aligning ourselves with the people involved with her death. They are not the enemy," the clan leader said calmly, but with a slight pressure in his tone. "The Leaf is doing what they can to help us against our true foes. They are where your anger should be directed towards, not our allies." At this point, Tsukiyo decided to chime in order to placate Shiranami. "The Hokage takes the promise he made to your clan with the utmost sincerity. As long as my team is within the walls of this village, we will do whatever we can to protect it." The dark-haired adolescent looked down at his plate before stating, "If your so-called great villages hadn't started this war, we wouldn't be having this conversation." With that, he placed his chopsticks down on his plate and stood up with it in hand. "Master, I would like to be excused." Gyoja looked at him before sighing lightly and nodding his head, signaling the boy to leave. With a light bow and respect, he headed towards the door and left the area. "Well, there goes the mood again. I must apologize for my son's behavior," Hato said with a forlorn sigh. "It's just that these past few couple years haven't been kind." "Please, there's no need for you to apologize," my teacher said calmly, looking at the man. "In our profession, we don't expect to be well liked by people outside our village anyway." Here she paused and took a sip of tea before continuing, "Though if you don't mind me asking, what exactly happened?" I could sense the pain in his heart grow deeper before he sighed. "This war hasn't been kind to anyone. It cost us the life of his mother, my wife." Koto paused the teacup that was to reach her mouth before lightly sighing in sympathy. "I suppose I can easily understand where his hatred of war stems from, but I'm curious where his hatred of us stems from. My wife was also a shinobi of the village, and my closest partner," Hato began explaining. "She and I were sent out on a mission that brought us close to the Kirigakure borders." He paused and looked somewhat distant before sighing. "About halfway through completing the mission, we had the misfortune of getting caught in a skirmish between some Kiri and Kumonin." He paused once more and looked down before closing his eyes. "It was only due to luck and her self-sacrifice that I was able to make it out alive, but in the process, she was gravely injured and we had no medical shinobi skilled enough to heal her." He looked back up at us before lightly sighing. "In the end, she succumbed to her wounds with our son watching over her weakened form." There was a moment of silence after that before Tsukiyo asked, "If that is the case, that still doesn't explain why he seems to hold us in contempt." There was a light smile on Hato's face, but hidden within was a sense of sadness. "Shiranami has always been a bright kid, and as a matter of fact I have no doubt he'll easily surpass me soon. That being said..." He paused and sighed, his mind came to the conclusion that the war between the hidden villages was all to blame for her early passing, and I have never seen him smile ever since. I suppose I am partly to blame. The village leader chimed in, gathering all our gazes. It was my decision to send you both there because I was confident in your capabilities, but I had been too rash. Gyoja closed his eyes for a moment before finishing. There are certain things I would change about that day if I could, but I had let my anger get the best of me at that time. You aren't to blame, Master. Hato said, lightly shaking his head. As shinobi, it was our duty, and there were things you couldn't have known about that mission. Hato looked at us before continuing, what my son despises isn't the leaf village in and of itself, but the idea of the great hidden villages due to their own parts in festering the atmosphere of the war. To him, if the great villages had not started this war, then he would not have had to experience his loss. There was a short moment of silence at the table at that statement, however. He's too naive, Kazumona stated before taking a sip of tea. The great villages are under their respective daimyo and obtain funding through them. Since the founding of the shinobi village system, the 5 shinobi villages had always had the backing of their respective daimyo before waging war. On a superficial level, if the kid wanted to put the blame on anyone, it would have to be placed on the daimyo's heads, however. The blonde-haired woman placed her teacup on the table. War is waged for the most asinine, selfish or simple of reasons: land, money, power, love, hatred, the list goes on. In this case, the war was waged because the current balance of power was threatening to collapse and the reign of the 5 great countries was crumbling. But do you know who actually made the first move in the war? Everyone at the table remained silent, for the answer was well known, but Kazumona continued regardless. It was the smaller nations who got too greedy for their own good and started making trouble around the borders of the 5 great nations. Those skirmishes festered and spread around the barriers between the nations until they could no longer sit back. The woman picked up her teacup once more before continuing. IWA was simply the first to act and stop the skirmishes around their borders, but why would they stop there? It would be much easier to just spread and capture the small villages, so that they wouldn't have to deal with them again, unfortunately. Those villages also acted as barriers between the great nations. My teacher followed up, causing Kazumona to smile and take a sip of her drink. Koto continued, if IWA captured those small villages, it would threaten the legitimacy of Konoha's borders, and so we had to step in. It caused a domino effect in which the other great nations deemed it necessary to start invading the smaller countries in order to prevent an uprising. Kazumona continued once again, picking off where Koto left. And since their actions caused a conflict of interest amongst the other villages, well, the end result is as you see now. In other words, here she placed her cup down before opening her eyes. The small nations could be considered a greater contributing factor to the current state of affairs, and if you really wanted to blame something more intrinsic, I suppose human nature would also be at fault. The greed of the smaller nations caused them to start skirmishes between each other in order to obtain more power, while the 5 villages were weakened. Likewise, the 5 countries, feeling their pride trampled and fear of their way of life being threatened, decided to retaliate. There was another pause of silence before the village leader sighed. Envy, greed, pride, fear, they are all emotions that can drive individuals to do unsavory things, let alone a group of them. He paused before slightly shaking his head. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters in this world is power, whether it be political or personal. Without the kind of power necessary to play a role in this war, we will all be forced to either endure or rely on those stronger than us. His words made the rest of us quiet, as we knew he was mainly referencing himself, but my mind was elsewhere. Strength to stop a war. As I was now, I was simply too weak. I never had any illusion that I was strong. After all, my teacher was still stronger than me if we went by our plain stats alone. I hadn't been the only one improving in the past years. In the grand scheme of things, I wasn't an important factor in this war. My presence in the world at this point was pretty much inconsequential. Even though my emotions were dulled and I didn't care much for anything, I still did want to live, but with my current strength level, that was impossible. If I were to go up against someone like Kushina, Hiruzen, or Jiraiya, I had no doubt in my mind that they would be able to kill me with a finger. This wasn't just a difference in level or ability that made me think that, but a complete difference in strength, a difference that I would not have been aware of if not for the change that popped up after I had reached level 50. If I wanted to live a calm life, with no worries or regrets, I needed to grow stronger. Much stronger. I suppose I can test some things later. On that note, Bohr spoke up, his voice cleaving the sullen atmosphere. How do the defenses in this place look like? Coming in, I saw that the surroundings were short on manpower, and there were several other deficiencies in the defensive capabilities of the wall around your city. Seeing as the conversation had begun going back to a more productive route, the village leader answered immediately. The last few attacks have caused substantial damage to our forces as a lot of my men have been injured. They also haven't been kind to our wall as you've stated. Mainly we will need more eyes and ears on the northern portion of the villager where the attacks have been more frequent. We all took in this information and Tsukio nodded his head before asking another important question: who exactly have been the primary aggressors? Along the way, I know we were nearly ambushed by mist shinobi, but have there been other major or minor villages participating in these attacks? The older man shook his head. No, it's mainly been the mist that has been harassing us, and occasionally we have had run-ins with lightning country, but those have been few and far in between. The mist really doesn't have anything better to do they? Kazumona muttered. Can you blame them though? My teacher said ill-humoredly, they've lost the least in this war due to their territory being in the middle of the ocean. They don't have any small nations to act as buffers between them and the other big countries due to their location acting as a natural buffer zone. They didn't have to call any uprisings from any of the smaller nations and really had no reason to take part in the war. That is the gist of it. The village leader said. I see. Tsukio muttered with a thoughtful expression before nodding. Let me know about any other weak points of the village, and we can work out a plan of action. The village leader nodded and began to describe his defensive layout, my teacher and Kazumona adding in their input as well. Adult talk, I thought, deciding to only pay half attention. With my eidetic memory, as long as I was paying marginal attention, I would remember all the information. I noticed Tunbi leave the room for whatever reason and decided not to dwell on it. I turned my gaze towards Hataru, who had been silent ever since Shiranami left. I could sense a growing sadness in her through my empathy, and so, being the kind and considerate individual I was, I asked, "Did your parents die too?" There was no doubt in my mind that I would need a shower after having received such a dirty glare from my inquiry. It was a good thing the adults were too busy talking about perimeter setup points to listen in on my conversation, or I might have been scolded by my teacher. There is something wrong with you, the blonde-haired girl stated before her expression became slightly forlorn once more. I miss her. I blinked. I'm assuming you mean your mother. Do you and Shiranami share the same mother? I asked curiously. She shook her head. No, I didn't really know his mother, but my mom. She bit her lip as sadness seeped deeper into her. I miss her. I rested my cheek against my palm. What about your dad? Again, she shook her head. I never got to know him since he died when I was too young to remember. At this moment, Tunbi re-entered the room with refreshments in hand and placed them around the table before standing next to Hataru and asking her kindly, "Lady Hataru, let me take your empty plate for you." The girl's expression brightened up ever so slightly as she replied, "Thank you, Tunbi." The man nodded in reply, "It is my duty, there is no need for you to thank me." And with that, he took her empty plate, and I watched him leave once more, noting that Hataru's emotions were slightly brighter than before. Well, even if you don't have your parents, there still seems to be people in your life who care for you, I stated to the blonde. She blinked and gave a light smile. I suppose that's true. Eventually, after having my fill and partially zoning out of the conversation, the long breakfast ended as the head of the table stood up. Thank you for joining me today and discussing our courses of action. With you by our side, I feel like my village will prosper just a little more. The thanks is all ours. Boar said, standing up, the rest of us following suit. We will do what we can to protect your village on our honor as leaf shinobi. The village leader smiled, I feel assured already. He then looked at Tunbi before stating, please do show our guests out, there are some things that I am unfortunately late to attending to. As you wish. The man said with a bow, before giving us a nod and leading us out the door. I again would like to thank you on behalf of our village. The man said with a bow before continuing, I believe you will be able to make your way back to your residence, but just in case. He fished out a scroll from his pocket and handed it to Tsukio. This is a general map of the village with your residence marked here. He said, pointing at a specific area on the eastern part of the map. Again, thank you. And with that, the man went back into the house. There was a moment of silence before a collective sigh rang out amongst my group. That was way too stiff. Turtle said, whole rubbing his legs. Having to sit in a seiza for that long makes my legs numb. My teacher rolled her eyes, come on Uri, it wasn't that bad, though I do admit that sitting formally for such a long time gets uncomfortable. Yes, Turtle's real name was Uri. That's what I'm saying. The silver-haired individual stated while cracking his neck, before looking at Boar, well, what's the next course of action? First things first. The man said, tucking the scroll away, this village is down on manpower as most of them are injured. It would help if we could remedy that a little. Yoru. On it. I said before 20 clones of me appeared around us. They all went towards the direction of the general hospital of this town in order to help heal the injured Tsuchigomo shinobi. Tsukio nodded his head, good now with that done, me, Viper, Tiger, and Monkey will survey the landscape more thoroughly in the cardinal directions. Yoru, you can take a little break from your work last night, while the rest of you should keep your guard up. Any suggestion? At the lack of response, Tsukio nodded, then let's begin. With that, he and his assigned group spread out leaving Koto, Uri, Kazumona, and I at the area. I'll be at the market district. Kazumona stated, her blonde hair waving in the wind as she turned around. I'll meet you all back at our place. And no sooner did she vanish from sight. I'll be off running around. Uri said before quickly dashing off. And I'll stay back at our building. Koto stated before patting my head, stay safe Yoru. I'll be fine. She smiled and vanished as well, leaving me alone in the relatively empty surroundings. I really shouldn't be doing this now, but I need to make up for my lack of physical training. I thought before sensing if there were any human in my general vicinity. Seeing as the coast was all clear, I thought to myself, ID create, empty. And immediately, the world around me changed. From my position as the epicenter, a dome spread throughout and changed the landscape of the surroundings. The sun was dark red and the sky was purple, there was neither wind nor sound of birds chirping. It was eerily quiet, however, my enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of moaning and groaning coming from the distance. This place. I thought to myself. I didn't really bother training here since I was mainly focused on research, and when I did train, there was no need for me to come here. The monster IDs were good for leveling up and possibly training skills, but aside from that it actually wasn't all that special in terms of growing my personal strength. I could still get practice for my skills through shadow clones, and so I didn't need to be here for that, and leveling only gave me stat points which I had only used a few of in these past years. All in all, I would probably never be here unless I wanted to get away for a little bit. Despite this, I had been spending more time in the monster IDs ever since a change had occurred to me not so long ago which led me to believe that speeding up my leveling was beneficial. Menu, I thought, opening up a list in front of my view. Status. Skills. Attributes. Inventory. Display settings. I swear that last one wasn't there before. I thought before lightly sighing and clicking on attributes, causing the interface to change before a list popped up in front of my view. Click on the attribute below to see its description. Visible attributes. Hit points, HP. Chakra points, CP. Chakra control, CC. Strength, STR. Vitality, VIT. Dexterity, DEX. Intelligence, INT. Wisdom, WIS. Energy, ENGY. Hidden attributes. Tears, T. Physical damage, P, DMG. Energy damage, E, DMG. Spiritual damage, S, DMG. Attack potency, AP. Speed, SPD. Lifting strength, LS. Striking strength, SS. Durability, DUR. I had scanned this list plenty of times before. There were so many aspects to my ability that I had never even explored simply because I had simply never thought to look into them. I had always simply assumed my status and skills were all the components that made up this game-like interface of mine. I hummed to myself before clicking on physical damage. While the other attributes had a lot of important information that I constantly read through, even though it was unnecessary due to my eidetic memory, the one that was relevant to my current situation right now was physical damage. However, I couldn't help but briefly turn my gaze towards the glowing tears attribute and sighing. I focused on the information before me. Physical damage, P, DMG. Physical damage is a hidden attribute that determines the damage output of your physical attacks. The scale of damage slightly increases with each level you earn, therefore, the damage might need to be calculated differently in order to accurately represent the total damage output of your attacks. Note, enemies of a lower tier than you will experience more damage when you attack them. Enemies of a higher tier will experience less damage when you attack them. My gaze was leveled on the information detailing how my damage would increase as my level did. This was only one of the few things that lead me to decide that leveling up would be in my best interest even if my stats lagged behind slightly. The only reason I had found this menu was because of the notification I had gotten when I had hit level 50. After reaching LVL 50, you can now view hidden attributes in menu. This was also the event that caused me to eventually discover the menu function of my ability. My physical damage output had increased from before, but it wasn't enough to be noticeable. Taken this way, my damage would actually start to grow at a slightly exponential rate as I gained more stats. With the knowledge of these new attributes as well, I was beginning to wonder if it would be better to just increase my level, thereby increasing my overall damage output. It wouldn't be noticeable immediately, but it would add up eventually. First things first. I thought before creating multiple copies of myself and having them train in my water-style techniques. Since I was so close to maximum proficiency in it, I might as well see if I could get it done with. With that, the 180 copies of myself went off into the distance in order to spam water techniques. Now then, I said to myself before clicking on the tears icon. Tears. I thought as I tapped my chin. There was a reason why I believed that I wouldn't stand even a fraction of a chance against in a somewhat serious fight between myself and a shinobi like Jiraiya or Minato. It was mostly because of the difference in tiers between us. More specifically, their tier advantage over me. There were many different tiers depending on the level of the individual, and they were measured by a number followed by a subunit letter. The lower the number, the greater the tier. For example, civilians had a tier of around 10C, which was a lower tier than jounin, who had tiers ranging from 7C to 7B. In the same field, a tier of 7A was greater than a tier of 7B. There were 3 sub-tiers in each tier ranging from letters C to A, and in order to gain a certain tier level, one needed to have a high enough level, and the corresponding stats for that tier. Generally speaking, a shinobi at Minato's level would on average have around the same level of power and would have a tier of 7A+. For me, however, even if I power leveled up to his level, if my stats were not up to a certain standard, I wouldn't gain the tier associated with that level. Similarly, if I had the average stats of someone at a 7A tier, but my level wasn't high enough to match that, I wouldn't gain the tier bonus associated with that tier. Why was tier even important? The reason was simple and a little complex. The general gist of it was that if an individual was a tier above another person, i.e. they were 7C, while their opponent was 8A or lower, then there was some kind of huge damage bonus applied to their attacks against their opponent, and this bonus stacked. In other words, someone like my teacher, who was a high-level Jonin shinobi, would deal much more damage to an average Chunin, who would be in a lower tier than her. Even though tier bonus damage stacked, it didn't account for hacks abilities or anything. Just basic energy, physical, or spiritual attacks. Furthermore, a lower tier individual, 8A, facing a higher tier individual, 7A, would do much less damage to them because they were at a lower tier. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even sure they would be able to do any damage to them unless of course certain techniques were used. Someone at a higher tier than you didn't just have a higher level or better stats. The visible attributes could only tell so much about an individual, but it didn't include innate capabilities and, more importantly, hidden attributes. Furthermore, it seemed as if those at a higher tier were almost at a different life level. It was kind of like how a child would never be able to beat an adult in a straight-up fight. If the child was given a gun, then he might be able to win, but even then, it wasn't a guarantee. Additionally, an individual at a higher sub-tier, 7A versus 7B, would also have a greater damage multiplier than those in a lower sub-tier, and this bonus increased as the tiers became larger again, not including hack skills like reality manipulation, though that was just my speculation. All of this roughly translated to: if I fought Minato to the death right now, he could kill me with a finger. Not only would he cause more damage to me, but his stats were also much greater than mine, and so even with the normal damage calculation, without tier bonuses, he could one-shot me. Furthermore, this tier bonus applied in reverse, and by that, I meant that while Minato would cause more damage to me, I would do less damage to him. However, there were some exceptions or rules for almost everything. If Minato gave me a glancing blow, I wouldn't suffer much damage, for example. This was also one of the reasons why the damage I did to others varied in value, even though my stats were basically static. It was just a difference in where I hit and how hard I hit. Furthermore, if he only cut off my hand or something, then I wouldn't die, even though his pure physical damage alone would be enough to kill me. There were many hidden variables to account for when calculating damage output, such as durability and the opponent's attack potency. Another example would be how damage taken to the head usually dealt more damage than, say, a hit to the stomach. Suddenly. Ping. Congratulations! Natural water affinity has leveled up by 1. Congratulations! Natural water affinity has reached level 100 max. Congratulations! Chakra control, CC, has increased to 97%. Neat. I thought. Along with the completion of my rumination, I thought for a moment on what else I could accomplish while I was here. For starters, I needed a powerful attack since, while my stats weren't anything to write home about, I did have a lot of chakra at my disposal. If I fought someone stronger than me and didn't really have the luxury of running away, I could blast him with something powerful and hopefully take care of him or her, so I needed something that would use my abundant chakra all at once in a powerful burst. Sure, it wasn't the most optimal attack solution, but it would be quite powerful, and it could be used in tight situations. I thought for a moment on what type of technique I wanted to create. What about something explosive? Along those thoughts, I gathered my chakra to the palms of my hands and converted it into lightning-attributed energy before condensing it. Slowly, I separated the palms of my hands while a ball of condensed lightning formed in between. However, I didn't stop there. I gathered as much chakra from my chakra center as I could, converted it into electricity, and continuously added and condensed it to the ball of lightning in my hand. It was only because of my immense chakra control and perfect control over my lightning attribute that I was able to condense this amount of concentrated energy into a single point. As the ball of condensed lightning became as large as a human head, stray arcs of electricity discharging from the sphere. This will do, I said, and opened my eyes before launching the orb of condensed energy into the distance. I watched in interest as the ball of condensed electricity flew away towards a distant hill and obliterated it. In an immense explosion of lightning energy, the ball of lightning expanded enormously as soon as it impacted the large hill. I could feel the shockwaves from even a kilometer away as a light breeze and subconsciously closed my eyes a bit, before the wind quickly died down. Congratulations, you have created a new skill. What would you like to name it? I'm not really good at naming, I thought before shrugging. Lightning bomb. Ping. Congratulations, you have created a new skill, lightning bomb. Lightning release, lightning bomb, active, LVL max. Lightning bomb is a skill made by condensing the user's chakra into a packed ball of electricity that expands when released from the user. Range, 1% per unit of chakra used in meters. If you use 1000 units of chakra for the skill, it will have a range of 10 meters. Damage, every unit of CP packed into the skill, i.e. if the user used 1000 units of camp into the skill, it will do 1000 HP worth of damage not including bonuses. Cost, varies based on the amount of chakra used for the skill. This is a useful technique, kind of hit or miss though, I thought as I read through the description. This was a powerful and useful skill, and as my level and stats increased, it would also grow along with me. The downside was that it took a while to charge and any competent shinobi would be able to kill me before I could adequately gather enough chakra for the technique to be useful. Plus, it was an extremely chakra-intensive technique in order for it to be effective. If I put all my eggs into that basket and missed, I would be screwed. However, it will do for now, I said. Now then, there was still one last thing I wanted to create. Intent. The feeling of the third Hokage's killing intent had left a profound impression on me, and it was something I wanted to replicate. Utilizing that sort of intent on an enemy would be quite impactful in a battlefield as a form of psychological warfare, and if my enemies were distracted for a moment, I could easily capitalize on that for a decisive kill. Intent of any kind was born from the mind and actualized in the spirit. What this meant was that if an individual wanted someone else to feel their intent, they would need to manifest it in the world through the use of their yin chakra half. From all the research Kodo had given me on chakra, I knew how chakra was composed on yin and yang, and that this union birthed the 5 primary elements of chakra that was seen in people: wind, water, earth, fire, and lightning. But that wasn't what was important. No, what was important was that like the 5 primary chakra elements, yin and yang could actually be used to create techniques. The hidden or secret techniques of Konoha's Nara clan shadow imitation technique and Akimichi clan multi-size technique utilized yin and yang release respectively, and were not tied into any of the 5 elements. Yin release was based on the spiritual energy that governed imagination, and was created by altering the ratio of spiritual and physical energy in favor of the former. Yang release was based on the physical energy that governed vitality, and was created by altering the ratio of spiritual and physical energy in favor of the latter. For now, I was focused on the first one. From what I read, in order to actualize intent with yin release, you needed to be at least moderately familiar with it since intent wasn't a difficult technique to develop. Thankfully, my illusion mastery was based on Genjutsu, which fell under the broad category of yin release, so I had a good amount of familiarity with it. The only reason I assumed I hadn't gotten a yin affinity or something like that was probably due to the fact that I hadn't explicitly employed it in my Genjutsu. It was basically like how you wouldn't expect to gain yin or yang release just by employing any random chakra-based technique despite chakra being composed of yin and yang. With that, I calmed my thoughts and focused my mind in my chakra center. Differentiating between the yin portion of my chakra wasn't too difficult, and getting a feel for it was actually easier than I thought. I was quite good at Genjutsu after all, so I wasn't too surprised. Ping. Congratulations! You have unlocked yin affinity. Yin affinity, passive, LVL1, 0.00%. Yin release is one of the 2 nature transformations that exist outside of the elemental circle, and is based on the spiritual energy that governs imagination. Yin affinity increases the effectiveness of your mental-based techniques, such as illusions and other forms of mental attacks. Passively increase in release effects 0.125%. Reduce cost of in release ninjutsu by 0.25%. I looked at the information displayed in front of me and thought. A prevalent observation I had immediately made was the fact that as opposed to the bonuses I got from my natural affinities, the ones I had obtained from my plain in affinity were half what I would usually obtain. This meant that having a natural affinity in those elements simply made me better and more effective at using them overall. However, other individuals could also theoretically level up their normal affinities, the ones they didn't have naturally, to level 100 as well. Oh well, it didn't really affect what I had to do. After obtaining my affinity, I concentrated my mind. Utilizing Hypercus, I rapidly understood and utilized my intent in conjunction with my in release. With but a thought, I was able to feel a pull on the in aspect of my chakra as I pushed forward with my intent, generating a formless wave of powerful energy that I could distinctly feel. Ping! Congratulations, you have created a new skill. What would you like to name it? In release, spiritual pressure. Ping! Congratulations! You have learned in release, spiritual pressure. In release, spiritual pressure, active/passive, LVL1, 0.00%. In release, spiritual pressure subjects the opponent to an energy-based mental pressure that can induce certain negative mental effects such as fear. The effects are greater the more energy, in your case CP, you contain compared to your opponent. Cost, 100 CP per SEC. Duration, 1 minute. I nodded in appreciation and turned off my new skill before standing up. I had finished doing what I had come here to do. More importantly, I now had a lot of skills, so I quickly opened my menu. Status. Skills. Attributes. Inventory. Display settings. And clicked on skills. As I scrolled through them, I couldn't help but think about how disorganized it was. I would have to fix that later, maybe by butting my elemental skills as sub-skills under their affinity and arranging this entire mess by alphabetical order. I went to display settings and adjusted a few parameters on my info screen before a message popped up. Would you like to save these settings? Y/N. Of course. So, I clicked Y and instantly, my skill list became more organized and appealing to look at. Now with that out of the way, it's about time I leave. ID, escape. I thought to myself as I snapped my fingers, causing the sky to crack before breaking into pieces. Unfortunately, I had not accounted for the fact that my location in the ID had changed and that I had exited at the corresponding location in the real world, so here I was in the middle of the village with people looking at me awkwardly from my sudden appearance. Luckily, this was a shinobi village and people disappeared and appeared all the time, so they soon ignored my presence and went on with their lives. And so, I went on with mine. Third-person POV. Shiranami looked up to the night sky before sighing and turning around. There before him were 4 other individuals communicating among themselves quietly. Magaki Group, he stated, gathering their attention. Konoha's presence has made things slightly problematic, but this could also be considered a chance for me. One of the individuals, a man named Akaboshi, stepped forward and asked, "Then, in the meantime, what will you have us do?" His question was mirrored with murmurs from the other 3 individuals who were curious as well. "Nothing at all," Shiranami replied. "Just do whatever it is you do in your simple lives, but in about a week, we will begin." Saying so, he stood up from the grass and walked back towards his building, yet a disturbing smile made its way on his face. This rotten world. He began to think, his grin growing wider. I'll make it crumble. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.